So today we have the privilege to be welcomed by the Executive Vice President of the European Commission, Mr. Maroš Šefčovič, and we're going to have a conversation about mining in Europe, refining in Europe, and making electric vehicles in this old continent. Mr. Maroš Šefčovič, thank you very much for receiving me in your beautiful office. Today we will speak about the supply chain from mine to electric vehicle made in Europe. So let's kick off with the mining part. We have seen recently that there was a major announcement in the north of Sweden about the Bergheir deposit. Do you believe Bergheir is a game changer?
First and foremost, thank you very much for bringing this topic to your wide audience or your podcast, because I think this is clearly the topic we need to have a very solid public discussion about. And as you rightly pointed out, we visited the region in January, thanks to Swedish presidency. And of course, we've been all very hopeful about the announcements, the new discoveries which are there for, I would say, very important critical raw materials deposits, but also all the discussions which usually are part of the decision-making process, how to guarantee the social acceptance, how to send the right messages to the local population that we actually mean no harm, but we mean bringing lots of new jobs, lots of new benefits, and that was the part of our trip to Kiruna.
So Bergheir has been announced as the biggest rare earth deposit in Europe. It could solve our 10% domestic extraction for rare earth. So do you believe it's a game changer?
I believe that it will be part of the game changing, because as you know, we need a lot of critical raw materials, and we want to get them, I would say, in the European way. So from one side, I think we are recycling superpower, and we really want to get around 15% of what we need in Europe as a critical raw materials from recycling, from so-called urban mining. But of course, we need the 85% of the rest. And I think that we should indeed prospect all the possibilities we have in Europe. What can we extract in Europe? Because we know that in extraction, meaning mining, but also in refining and in processing these materials, we would be the most sustainable on this planet, because it's our ethos. This is how we do the thing, and I know that mining had a bad name because of the history, but totally we are in different century. We have different technologies. We have different rules, and I think that it could also serve as kind of pioneering good example process vis-a-vis other parts of the world, that if we want to be in climate neutral, healthy planet, we also do. We have to do the mining in a new sustainable way.
Yeah, we visited the north of Sweden, the north of Finland. We see there that they do responsible mining. They are in the top 3 in terms of ESG, environment, social and governance criteria. I have spoken to a lot of experts in the field, and the typical number that we hear is that we need at least 10 to 15 new mines for energy transition metals by 2030. Do you think this is realistic?
I think it's of course very, very ambitious, but I think what we need is to kind of unlock the mining, that we would see the first successful projects, so that other project managers and also local authorities especially, but also member states and investors would start to believe again in European mining. I mean, one mine which I haven't visited, but I saw a very impressive PowerPoint presentation, was the tungsten extraction in Austria, and there you could see that you can really have sustainable mine in the middle of beautiful mountains without disturbing anyone around, and being, I think, second biggest producer of tungsten. So I believe that we already have the technology. We know how to do it in Europe. We just have to have a couple of successful projects where we'll prove, look, this is how it should be done, and then I believe that we would go to the level which is required. But to have 13 mines open and being able to process the extraction material in 7 years, it's very ambitious, even for ambitious commission. So I would say we need to go in that direction, and we also have to have our strategies, how to cooperate with our neighbors, and if necessary also with the third parties from faraway worlds where we need this
responsible sourcing.
But to work really, I mean, I would say with our standards.
So we see that the NIMBY remains a big problem, not in the north of Sweden. People are in favor of mining because they see how modern mines in Sweden, Norway, Finland operate. But if you speak to other people in the rest of Europe, you see that NIMBY is often one of the key barriers for having mines in Europe. So how do you think, how can we overcome this NIMBY problem?
Yeah, I heard it once from one NGO representative that we should try to push it from NIMBY to PIMBY, meaning please in my neighborhood. And of course, it's easier said than to be done. And only a way how I think we can accomplish is to really build the public trust. So I think that you need to work on this public acceptance from the beginning. The people really have to know what is the plan, what are the environmental standards, that today nobody is going to create waste, destroy the water reservoirs, or just simply take the profit, leave the hole and disappear. That's not gonna happen, and I think that we are ready to guarantee this new approach not only from local levels but also from national and European levels. And I think what is also very important is to show that what kind of tangible benefits there could be for the local community if the mine is open. What kind of new jobs? What could be, let's say, the shares for the local municipalities? How the infrastructure would be improved? And also, I would say the fact that we need these new critical raw materials for building better Europe, new Europe, greener Europe. And I think all these new technologies require this type of critical raw materials. So I think it's really more responsible if we try to get as much as we can of these critical raw materials from our soil, because we know that we will do it responsibly.
Yeah, we call it responsible mining, a community-centric model, so that the benefits are also for the local population. So that's one aspect for getting mines implemented in Europe. I think the other part is related to finance and to permitting. You are one of the people that has been driving the Critical Raw Materials Act. One of the things there is that you want to initiate strategic projects. Do you believe that strategic projects, that concept will actually help us in implementing mines in Europe?
Here we are kind of learning from the past experience, because I was also responsible for improving the energy infrastructure in Europe. So what we did is that we had so-called Connecting Europe facility mechanism, when we just listed all the important interconnectors, LNG ports and other parts of critical infrastructure on, let's say, on one list. We've been working with our member states on having a European consensus on these projects, and it gave them the, I would say, necessary label, which would then allow us also to finance part of the feasibility studies, to work with the financial institutions like EIB, BRD, KfWs or national promotional banks to work on guarantees, work on investments, and simply to kind of focus the minds of the investors to go for that. And we would like to do exactly the same. I hope that thanks to the great cooperation of the European Parliament with the member states, I believe that before the end of the year we will have a, I would say, general agreement on the Critical Raw Materials Act. And I would say immediately we should start to work on the list of what should be this strategic project if it comes to the mining, so we can very quickly build consensus which are these 10, 15, 20 mines we would like to support, and then look for project promoters, financing, and work on all the details, so we would see it as a concrete project.
Because financing is one of the difficult parts. I have seen recently that clearly the political mood in terms of mining in Europe has changed for the better. But the investment mood hasn't. We still see that investors prefer to put their money in gigafactories rather than in mines. So how do we get the investors on board?
I would say that the same mood as it is now with mines was 5 years with gigafactories. When I was starting with the European Battery Alliance, there was also lots of hesitation in that regard. But what the investors need to see are the first successful projects, and then the mood changes. But I agree with you that when I'm talking to the financial sectors, including our, let's say, institutional banks, usually the worry is that the mining had, I would say, this bad aura around it. But I think that we are gradually changing. We managed to get it into the lending mandate of the EIB a couple of years ago. Then, of course, the ESGs, meaning the guidelines and the rules and taxonomy and all these elements, which simply proves that the mining should be done in a sustainable way. And once you invest in such a project, that you can prove it on your balance sheet that you are a responsible investor. All this should help. And then, of course, the big part where we have to put, let's say, all our minds to good collective work would be the risking of these projects. Because indeed, in today's volatile world, you have a investment a timeline which spans really over several years until you get the product. And with the interest rates, with inflation, with everything, we need to find a way, and we are working on it, how to also use the public budgets with the promotional banks to offer kind of de-risking tools, which would, let's say, make it a little bit easier for investors to come and invest.
So de-risking for responsible mining. We also know, of course, that it doesn't make any sense to extract lithium or any other critical metal if you don't have the refining capacity in Europe. Over the last years, we see that refineries and smelters are having a difficult time because of the high energy prices. So how do you believe we can react there to make sure that the smelters are not going to close down in Europe?
Yeah. I totally agree with you that it wouldn't have a point that we would extract let's say, lithium and ship it over to Chile or China for processing. Because of business logic is not there. Carbon footprint would be, of course, dramatically worse. So you kind of lose, would invest in sustainable mining by, I would say, a non-sustainable processing. So it has to go hand in hand, and we have to work on the whole value chain: extraction, processing, refining, using it for what we need. I mean, if you're talking about lithium, of course. The gigafactories. I'm glad that we started with cathode anode, the so-called CAM material productions in Europe, because without that, again, you cannot build a battery. And then, of course, recycling. So we need to work on the whole value chain and seeing the shift in consumer and customers' behavior in Europe, the increase of EVs on the market. I think the business case is clearly there. We just need also to help the industry to overcome these hesitations and go in that direction. Speaking about the smelters, aluminium, for me, I mean, of course, we cannot describe it as a critical raw materials from the point of view that where it's located, but you need it. You need it for cars. You need it for planes. You need it for all sorts of production. And of course, who produces the aluminium with the lowest carbon footprint? We Europeans.
We do, yes.
Why there is a risk of closing them down? These are the high energy prices. And this is, I would say, the horizontal problem which we have to solve. And we are doing our utmost to work with our member states to agree upon new electricity market design, hopefully by the end of the year, which would allow long-term planning and so-called contract for difference and long-term contracts, which I hope will bring the stability and push the prices lower.
Because Europe is basically producing what I call fair metals. They're produced in a proper way, socially, environmentally, with low footprint, with proper workers' rights and respect for human rights and everything included. But how do we compete with countries where CO2 emissions are much larger? Is there a possibility to have some kind of border adjustment mechanism also for nickel, for example?
I mean, we are going to do, I would say, several things in that regard. The first one is indeed, as you suggested, so-called CBAM. This is border adjustment mechanism. And here we are focusing, I would say, on the 5 most, let's say, energy-intensive material like steel, cement, and others. And we actually started now the first phase where we want to see the reporting from the importance. What is actually the carbon footprint of all these materials which are brought in Europe? And our message is very, very simple. pay the fair carbon price at home or pay it at borders to Europe, because we are not going to allow anymore that we would be penalized for, as you said, producing fair metals, for suppressing and lowering our carbon footprint, only to be kind of replaced by the cheap carbon-intense imports from abroad. So it will not be easy to implement. We are fully aware that this is a challenge, is the first type of legislation of this kind, but we have to go through this, and I believe that if we do it, it would be also a very important message to other parts of the world.
So should we expand the CBAM mechanism to nickel and lithium and other critical metals?
I think that at first we have to make sure that this mechanism works. So we are starting now with, I would say, this reporting phase for 1 or 2 years, and then of course we will once we are very clear about the mechanism and methodology, and we will be very transparent also with our partners and the importers or exporters, if we are talking about third countries, and then we start to introduce the levies. What I think we will do afterwards, we assess how it works, but I think that the logic is there that we cannot kind of build a climate neutral world if we would have these huge discrepancies in the carbon footprint of the production. And part of, I would say, how to tackle this issue is also how are we going to adjust the public procurement, how are we going to adjust the using of so-called competitive sustainability approach in procuring the products for European market.
Yep. So we've spoken about responsible mining and refining of fair metals in Europe. The next step, of course, is to also integrate those metals, refined metals, in the batteries. You've been one of the architects of the European Battery Alliance in 2017. We can say that has been a great success. If we look at the 2022 top 10 of battery manufacturing capacity, then we see that 5 out of 10 countries are European countries. The only problem is there is one number one there that is running away with this lead, and this is China, who now has 77% of the battery capacity. So how do you think we should react in Europe towards this Chinese lead in batteries?
Yeah, I think that it's again something which the trade professionals describe as a excessive export capacities. I think if it comes to the batteries, I'm very glad that we approved the battery regulation in Europe, because here for the first time we implemented this competitive sustainability mechanism. What it means in practice is that each battery will have a digital passport, which will be the publicly accessible QR code, and you would see what is the carbon footprint, where the critical raw materials came from, what is the warranty for recycling. So I would say all the responsible behavior would be clearly reflected in the digital passport of the batteries, and we would just simply make sure that only this, I would say, responsibly manufactured batteries would be placed on the European market. And this is something what I believe we would have to use more widely if we are talking about hydrolyzers productions, about windmill productions and all other products, because I think this is clearly the way forward, and Europe also have to be very clear that for us, made in Europe is very important, and that we are ready to fight for our industry, because the industry is responsible. They're pushing down the carbon footprint, and they are treating also the employees in a proper way. And therefore, I mean, we need to protect this type of economy, and not some kind of race to the bottom where the price is the only criterion.
Of course, it's not only China in terms of the battery competition. We also see now that because of the Inflation Reduction Act, there is a danger that European battery companies will start producing batteries in the United States because of the tax credits. So how do we deal with the United States in this case?
So far, I think that the European story, as you said, is a quite good one, because we started from the scratch in a very short period of time. We have now 30 gigafactories in making, 190 billion euros private investment, which is really no mean feat. And I have to say, I'm not surprised that also Americans realize that this is the future. They jump on that wagon, and they introduce the Inflation Reduction Act, which is of course much simpler for them because they have one tax system and they can do a lot through the tax breaks. So I think what is very important on our side is to respond by more agile assessment of how we use different European supportive mechanisms. We have still quite strong firepower in innovation, modernization fund, the Just Transition Fund. We are helping our member states through cohesion funds, and there have to be very clear and quite high allocation for environmentally sound projects. And of course, all these battery projects or future-oriented technologies projects are of that category. But what we need to improve is a kind of one-stop shop advisory service here in the Commission to help project promoters or city managers. What is the best way to start discuss the funding? We have to be much faster.
Speed is of the essence.
The speed is of the essence. So we had very good experience with the mechanism of IPCEI, which is the abbreviation for important projects of the common European importance or interest. But the thing is that it really helped us to bring the first very important investment into the European market. But we do not have the luxury of the time we had at that time. So it cannot take us 2 years to assess them. It must be much faster because we see that in US to get approval for the project under IRA is really very quick. You just need very, I would say, limited documentation. And we just simply have to go a little bit also in the way of being able to do a little bit more risk taking and simply to also use more our venture capital in Europe because we rely much more on the banks. Americans rely much more on the investors, on the pension funds, on the private equity, and they are a little bit more prone to take riskier projects. But here, I'm telling to every gigafactory promoter, every lithium mine promoter, these are no regret projects. Everything what you produce will be used because it will not be enough for what are the projected productions. So we just need to help these businesses, these project promoters to succeed.
So this brings us to the final product of the supply chain made in Europe from mine to electric vehicles. So let's speak about the electric vehicle market here. I recently read an article in a Chinese newspaper saying that the Chinese lead in EVs is unassailable. Game, set, and match for China. Harsh words.
They are harsh words, and you know, we are not only good tennis players. I think still better than the tennis players in China, and I think that we could be really proud that we have very good tradition that the best, cleanest, safest cars in the world been always produced in Europe, and I believe that this will continue to be so.
But haven't we waited too long with going electric in Europe?
I think we did, to be quite honest, and I remember all the difficult discussions we had around diesel engines, and I think it was kind of the tax we paid for their success, because indeed at that time this was the best technology in the world. It was, if it comes to internal combustion engines, this was the cleanest technology.
Very complex technology. EV technology is very simple. It's we've
been leading the world. So I understand that generation of designers, constructors, and CEOs who've been kind of working all their lives on the diesel engine, suddenly tell them that the baby you've been working all your life on is kind of, you know, of another era, and now we have to focus on something which is actually simpler, which is electric, and which is completely new technology. So I think that hesitation was clearly there. Therefore, now we have to do the catching up. And I think if it comes to the car manufacturing, the quality, and tradition, I have no worries at all. Where we need to catch up, this is the battery production, quality of the batteries, and therefore we invest a lot of money. I think actually more than China in research and innovation of the batteries. And I think once we catch up with the quality and battery technologies, I'm sure that the mechanics of the car, the tradition, the design, and everything else for which we are, I would say, so proud for in Europe, that also the European electric vehicles will continue the tradition to be the best cars in the world.
But still, the European Commission is also very worried with the competition from China. There's recently, we started this anti-subsidy investigation into China because the Chinese EVs, they are coming. There is a tsunami of Chinese EVs coming. They will be around 40% cheaper. How are we going to protect ourselves?
I think that this decision which we have taken was really at the high time, and it was a correct one, because we in Europe, we are really free traders, but we also want to be fair traders. And you describe it very correctly. I mean, if you are talking about tsunami of EVs coming from China, is it really only the economic factor? We really think that we have to investigate this thoroughly, because with the OPEC system of different state subsidies, usually the big state companies giving different kind of orders to the producers, we have strong indications that we have to investigate this export properly, because we want to be sure that the trading is fair. If it's fair, there is nothing to worry about. If it's not fair, we have to just simply use our trade defense mechanisms, because we shouldn't kind of repeat the photovoltaic panel history. I think we paid very high price. The innovation was coming from Europe, but we again kind of let our market to be captured by subsidized production.
It's the same for wind turbines at the moment?
Now therefore we have very intense discussions with the wind industry, with the hydrolyzers producers, and also with other future-oriented technologies. We just simply have to be much more vigilant, assertive, and to kind of also project our readiness to use the mechanisms which we developed for the defense of European market. Of course, we never thought that we would need to use them, but the geoeconomics has changed so much over the last 3 years. Yes. That, I mean, there is no other choice.
So do we need tariffs, or do we need to subsidize made in Europe EVs, or do we need a combination of both?
I would say that we need to explore all options. Clearly, I think what is very important in this regard is that we would use every cent we have in the EU budget and through the process of legitimate allowed state aid to the maximum. So if we are using public funds, they should be definitely matched or doubled by private investment. We should better use the leveraging mechanisms through our promotional banks, and really bring much more venture capitalists. We are still biggest trading bloc in the world. We are clearly one of the top 3 global economies, and I don't think that you have more green public than you have in Europe. So you have clearly the customers, you have demand, you have a public opinion support, and therefore I think that if we create the proper framework for the investors, it's very clear that the place to invest is Europe.
Yeah, but still, if the Chinese EV is going to be 40% cheaper than the German EV, how do we convince European consumers, even the green ones, that they should go for the made in Europe EV?
Yeah, I think that 40% difference is clearly not natural. Therefore, we are investigating.
Yeah, but maybe it's also because we produce too large and too complex EVs. We should go for entry-level EVs in Europe.
I think we have to work on making sure that energy prices would be lower. I know from my contacts with the European car industries that there will be literally hundreds of new models of EVs coming to the market, not only the big premium brands, but also smaller cars. And I believe that once we would reach the full capacity of the gigafactories which are being built in Europe for producing the batteries, also the cost of batteries would go down. And therefore, I think that also the scale of the production, the transformation of the whole, let's say, value chain which is being built right now would actually lead us to not only the higher quality, a better choice, but also lowering the prices. So all this should be done, and at the same time, as I said, we should be very vigilant concerning the imports to Europe. Let's have a thorough investigation, and once we have the results, we can use our trade defense mechanism.
So if proven guilty, import tariffs would be an option?
I think that we will cross that bridge when we'll come to that, because we have a lot of options there. So I wouldn't like to jump to that conclusions without having, I would say, the proper assessment. And as you, I'm sure, noticed, there was a string of visits of my colleagues commissioners to China over the last couple of weeks, and the issue of the fair trade, issue of the illegal subsidies, issues of access to the public procurement in China, fair trading conditions for both European and Chinese companies in both markets, been always on the table. So we will definitely be continuing raising this issue with our Chinese counterparts.
Yeah, so this brings us to the final part of this conversation, the overall policies. Europe has been very active recently in developing this CRMA, the Critical Raw Materials Act. You've been very active in the Net Zero Industry Act. Still, recently I was at a big debate organized by Euromines, and one of the panel members said the following: China directs, United States incentivizes, and Europe regulates. Should we learn a little bit more from the Chinese or the Americans in our policies?
I think of course, the European Union, as you know, is sui generis, so it means that we are really the union of 27 member states, and the way how we managed our own affairs, it's of course stemming from this tradition and from the history. So to make sure that single market works, we have to have uniform rules, and you can get them through the regulation, through the lawmaking. But what I would agree with you is that we are benefiting a lot, and the so-called Brussels effect really brought a lot of the European legislations to become global standards, and I think that was extremely beneficial for European businesses. But now, because the world is evolving so quickly,
the neoliberal order is finished. We live in protectionism. We live in resource nationalism.
Yeah, you're right, but still, I would say that if you let's say, even I would say today's, if you travel abroad, so if let's say the global companies producing food products or toys or any other products, usually the CE mark or European standards are still considered the best in the world. So if, let's say the customer is looking, okay, what I'm going to buy, is it European or other standards, they go for European standards. And that's, I think, good for our business. But I think that in this new dynamics of the new global order, which is now emerging, we clearly need to combine, I would say, this regulatory power with much more agile financing, investor support, closer working with the banks, leveraging the public funds we have at our disposal. And we also, I think, clearly demonstrated over the last 3 years, be it because of COVID or energy crisis, that we also are learning how to use also the state aid mechanisms with, I would say, this new with this new approach to actually help the businesses and help them quickly.
But don't we need a kind of a European state aid, where the state aid is going directly from a European innovation fund to a company, rather than being directed through one member state, because then you're destroying European solidarity?
I think that as you know, with our, I would say, medium term plans are to have so-called European sovereignty fund. Because I think that some of the projects are really so cross-border, so big, that on top of the, I would say, state aid coming from the member states, which should be fair, and we are doing our utmost to make sure that it's always properly assessed. Also, you would benefit a lot from such a sovereignty fund. Until we get there, we made this interim step, which is called STEP. So this is like 10 billion financial mechanism, which we want to again leverage through our promotional banks to get to much stronger firepower of, I think, 160 billion would be the ratio we are looking at. And that could be really used for supporting the project of strategic importance for the European economy.
So Europe is getting its act together, and it will be necessary because in the end we also need to meet the goals of the Green Deal, and you are the best person to do so because now you're in charge of the Green Deal. So I wish you very good luck with the implementation of the Green Deal.
I will need it. Thank you very much for that.
I will
do my best, and thanks for this interview.
Yes, thank you very much.